What's up? It's Phil from Fit Will Exposed, and in this episode, I'm going to be giving you guys 6 reasons as to why you may be a weak puller off of the floor during deadlifts. Because as far as I'm concerned, there's a lot of people who could lock out the weight once it gets to around their knee level, but it's just the whole getting it from the floor to the knee level that's the hard part for a lot of men and women. Now, I know that for me in the past, and even up to today, I'm still not as strong as I could be off of the floor. But I have been improving, and I have a lot of thoughts to share with you guys today. So I hope you guys learned something. Okay, so the first reason why you're weak off the floor is because the weight is just too heavy to begin with. So let's say that your 1 rep max deadlift is 500 for a single, and it's already enough of a grinder. You're not going to be able to get 585. I don't care how hard you pull. It's probably not even going to budge off the ground. And that's simply because your strength is not up to par. So just keep that in mind. It's not that you're weak off the floor. It's just that the weight is just it's just too heavy overall. You just can't handle it. You just can't handle it physically, mentally, and you just need to scale back on the weight. Okay, so the second reason as to why you may be weak off the floor is simply because your technique and your setup are not up to par. Now, if you don't know how to engage your lats, breathe properly, load up the hamstrings, engage your quads at the beginning of the lift, and a host of other things, then you're leaving so much strength potential on the table, and that's really going to limit your pull. So before you say you're weak off the floor, try to look at your technique, try to look at your setup, try to evaluate it, and get a coach to look at it, and then you can take it from there. Okay, so the third reason as to why you may be weak off the floor, this is a bit of a 2-in-1. It's that you're mentally not ready, and also you're not patient. Now, regarding the patience, a lot of people could actually lift the weight, but they just get too impatient, so they just drop it. So let me give you an example. I fell as a victim to this. Like, I would, especially in the past, I'd be pulling a weight off the floor, and if it wouldn't go up in the first second and a half, I'd pretty much give up. Not knowing that if I would have just held on for a good, 2 seconds, maybe 2.5 seconds, it would have flew up. So that's what you have to understand. It's not going to fly up right away, especially if you're already weak on the floor to begin with. It's the hardest part of the lift for a lot of people. So chances are that once it gets to the knees, it's pretty much going to fly up. But if you're really struggling at the bottom part of the lift, you have to give it a bit of patience. I'm not saying you have to wait 5 seconds either, but don't wait 1 second. Don't just pull it for a second and say, okay, I can't do it. Because chances are if you waited another second, you probably would have got it if you just kept pulling. Okay, so this brings me to the second part of this tip, which is the mental aspect. So let's say if you could pull 475 for a triple, and then on another day you go in for your single and you try to hit 495 pounds or 500, and it doesn't even budge off the ground. Well, chances are that mentally you just weren't prepared and you were actually scared or intimidated by the number, because technically you should be able to hit 495, 500 if you hit 475 for a triple. So what I'm trying to say is that you don't want to be intimidated by numbers. At the end of the day, it's just a number. Try not to be too scared of it. I know it's easier said than done, but just try not to be too scared. Just approach it, with confidence, and you'll most likely get the lift. Okay, so now I want to discuss more of the programming and the exercises for guys or women who are weak off the floor. Now, I know this is going to vary from person to person. A lot of people are going to say, oh, well, these exercises, they change up the mechanics of the deadlift, so it's not necessarily going to carry over. So I'll give you a few options here. If you're weak off the floor, a lot of people could benefit from snatch grip deadlifts, deficit deadlifts, band resisted deadlifts, or chain resisted deadlifts. One of the 4 are most likely going to benefit you. Or if you're maybe a bit more rare and a bit more special, then none of these will benefit you. But for the most part, one of these will. And I'll break down every single one. So the bands are basically going to accommodate the resistance. And also, I don't like it when people are weak off the floor and then they put the bands in a certain way where the tension only kicks in at the knee level. That's not really going to help you from the floor. So if you're weak off the floor and you want to use bands to assist you, I'd recommend that you put the bands forward from the barbell and backwards from the barbell, so a few inches away or maybe a few feet away. So that's really going to make the bottom harder, because I see a lot of guys on YouTube, they're doing these crazy band resisted deadlifts with these crazy numbers and crazy band tension, but the band tension only kicks in when they're around the the thigh level or the knee level. But that's not going to help you necessarily off the floor. Now, the same thing could be said with the chains too. And then we got the deficit pulls. Some people say that they're going to change the mechanics of the lift. In that case, I understand. But at the same time, if you're pulling off, you know, a 1 to 2 inch plate, I don't think it's going to change the mechanics too much. And it does tend to benefit a lot of powerlifters. A lot of powerlifters have seen a lot of positive feedback, positive carryover with deficit pulls. Okay, so another option if you're weak off the floor is snatch grip lifts, which I've personally seen a lot of carryover from my personal training, because the snatch grip lifts basically force you to use a wider grip, so you have to bend over more. It recruits a lot more of your upper back and lat muscles, so you have to work overtime, and it increases the range of motion. So it's kind of like a deficit pull, except you're pulling from the floor, if that makes any sense. But what I'm trying to say is that the band lifts, the chain lifts, the deficits, or the snatch grip lifts, one of the 4 should have carryover to your lift off the floor. So you might want to incorporate one of them if you're past the novice phase and you just want to increase your strength off the floor. Okay, last but not least, another reason why you may be weak off the floor is because your assistance lifts haven't been carrying over as much as you wanted them to. Now, a lot of people who are weak off the floor, they start doing all these assistance lifts. The problem is that these assistance lifts are not appropriate for their goal. So let's say, for example, if you're really weak off the floor and you start doing, you know, Yates rows, that's not necessarily going to have a lot of carryover. On the other hand, let's say if you do something like a Pendlay row, like a snatch grip Pendlay row, off like a deficit or something like that, that's most likely going to have more carryover than the Yates row if you're weak off the floor. And that's the thing. I can't tell you which lift is going to be best for you for the most part, because you have to kind of play around with a few lifts to really find out what's going to carry over and what isn't. Because there's a lot of lifts out there, like let's say the 45-degree back extension with the bar. A lot of people say that's the best lift, one of the best lifts for the floor. And me personally, I found more success when I would do that lift with 25-pound plates as opposed to 45s, because I felt like with the 45s I'm way too high up and it reduces the range of motion a bit too much for me. So if I get that extra range of motion with the 25 or 35-pound plates, that's what really helped me. And also keep in mind, when you're doing some of these assistance lifts, it allows you to practice the deadlift even more. So let's say you're doing the 45-degree back extension, you could practice engaging your lats on the bar. So it's pretty specific to the deadlift, because you're holding onto a bar, you're pulling it off the floor, you're engaging and recruiting certain muscles that the deadlift does as well. And same thing with the Pendlay row. The Pendlay row, although it is a different lift from the deadlift, a lot of powerlifters swear by this movement for helping them their strength off the floor. You know, you're bending over, you're grabbing a bar, you're engaging the lats, you're staying tight, you're pulling hard. So it's like you have to find what lifts really work for you. And I can't tell you this, and it is going to take some time. And you may find that certain lifts will carry over for a certain amount of time, but then eventually they'll no longer help you out. So it is a journey, and I'm going to make a video on this called trial and error lifting, but just take that into consideration. So that's basically it. 6 reasons as to why you may be weak off the floor. I want to know in the comment section below, are you guys weak off the floor? Also, what lifts have helped you with your pull off of the floor? And I'll see you guys in the next video.